So today we have what I regard as a very distinguished guest, Kathleen Dean Moore. She is a Distinguished Professor of Philosophy at Oregon State University, Emeritus, Professor Emeritus. She is an environmental philosopher. She writes about moral, spiritual, and cultural relationships in the natural world. She is the author of numerous books. We have several of them here. It includes Wild Comfort, The Solace of Nature, Hold Fast, River Walking, a novel called Piano Tide, and which was the winner of the 2007 Oregon Book Award. So she has also been nominated for another Oregon Book Award for another book. She is the co-editor of two other books, one of which that I read some 10, 15 years ago when it came out, called Moral Ground. It was what was the latest ethical action for a planet in peril. So her concern about the growing extinction crisis has led her to write her most recent book, which I believe is in here, Earth's Wild Music, in Defense of Nature. She lives in Corvallis in the summers, she lives in Corvallis, and in the summers she writes from a small cabin where two creeks and a bear trail meet a tidal cove in the southeast Alaska Islands. So here's Kathleen Dean Moore.
Thank you so much. It's really a delight to be here. I walked onto campus and there was a big sign, a banner, and it said, "From knowledge to action." And I thought, that's the place I want to be. So let me ask you, how is the microphone? It's okay. And let me say that one of my pet peeves is that they make these things impossible to open. How many people find that difficult? You'd think I could put a flange on them or something. From the time I've started to be a writer, I have called myself a nature writer. And I've never been really quite clear what that is. This wonderful poet, Mary Oliver, wrote, "My work is loving the world. Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Let me keep my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished, which is mostly rejoicing, which is gratitude." And I thought, well, that seems like a good job. That seems like something I would want to do. When I first started writing, which was 50 years ago, writing these love songs was just very simple. It was very straightforward. You just go someplace wonderful, and you open your heart, and you open your notebook, and you tell the truth. So I wrote lots and lots of books about praise and celebration. Lots of them I wrote sitting on the bow of my husband's drift boat on the Willamette River. And I said things like, this wild, reeling world is extraordinary, irreplaceable, wonder-filled, beautiful, life-giving. And if the good English word for that is sacred, then let us not be afraid to use that word. So these are some of the covers, of the books that having a good tech person doesn't mean that the person who's pushing the buttons has any sense. Okay, so there were lots of books that I wrote, and they were all celebration. And honestly, to my mind at that time, the biggest question a nature writer had to ask herself was, what does a nature writer wear to a book launch? I mean, so my daughter, who pays attention to these things, said, well, no problem, we'll go shopping. And so we did, and she brought out all these beautiful things, all taupe and white and flowing and scarves. You could only imagine how lovely. I wrapped myself in all these things, and I felt so much like a nature writer, and I walked out and I said to my husband, "Do I look like a nature writer?" He says, "No, you look like a roll of toilet paper." But that was just part of the problem. And as time went on, the problems got bigger and bigger, because as time went on, loving the world became more complicated and rejoicing got a little bit harder. Because even as I was celebrating this natural world, it was slipping away. I was midway through writing this essay on frog song when developers bulldozed the marsh for condominiums. And I had just published an essay about an owl's nest in a favorite lodgepole pine forest when the forest and the nest and the owlets burned to the ground. That executives of multinational extractive industries were gathering around these mahogany tables, devising business plans that would take down the great systems that sustain life on Earth and all the other human lives and natural lives. It was a time of what I would call sacrilege. Sacrilege from sacred, which means sacred, and legere, which means to steal. It was a time of the theft of sacred things. So I did the best I could, and then I went to a conference, and here's what I heard. It was 500 scientists, led by a group from Berkeley, and what they said was that if the world does not take immediate action, by the time today's children are middle-aged, the life-supporting systems of the planet will be irretrievably damaged. Today's children, my children, Zoe, Theo, Lem, you can name your own children by the time they are middle-aged. The life-supporting systems, the agriculture, the ocean currents, the fresh water, this is a problem. Because we love this world and we love our children. It's heartbreaking. If you were born before 1970, do the math. If you were born before 1970, then you were alive when there were more than twice as many plants and animals and forests and fields as there are now. And may I invite you just to take a minute and think about when you were a child. Did you have a special wild place? Did you have a special place outside where you could go and you would be comforted and it would be beautiful and reliable? If you were born after 1970, then you have spent your life in a world that is half of what it should be. An impoverished and simplified and drained and bulldozed world. Let me ask you, could you go back to that place you just envisioned and find it whole? So much loss. Scientists express this heartache in numbers. Let me just say that since 1970, that same 1970, the number of birds on the planet has been reduced by 3 billion. So I decided that I would try to do the math and figure out how many times that line of birds, those line of disappeared and vanished birds, could go to the moon and back. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the math. If you do all that multiplying and dividing, but I think that that line of dead birds would go to the moon, come back again, and go back to the moon again. So I imagine those 3 billion birds sitting somewhere on the moon. So let's get some numbers out here. Let's do the math. In the 50 years since I've been writing about nature, on my watch, 60% of the individual mammals have been erased from the face of the earth. 6 out of every 10 beings. 50% of grassland birds have been lost. This one breaks my heart. 78% of migrating shorebirds have been lost. 78%. That means that when you go to the beach and you see the shorebirds on the beach, there are 22% of what there were 50 years ago. Some 80 to 90% of big fish have been destroyed. 33% of the population of North American birds, that's the robins, that's the meadowlarks, that's spotted towhees, that's 33% has been lost. Here's some numbers. Now, of the global vertebrate biomass, that is, of all the biomass of animals on the planet that have backbones, 60% is cows and other bloviating livestock. 36% is human beings, and 4% is wild creatures. Half of the birds alive today are chickens in cages on factory farms. Half the birds alive on the planet are caged. And the buildings and the infrastructure now outweigh all the trees and shrubs in the world. Unless the world stops soon, acts soon to stop extinctions, I'm going to write my last nature essay on a planet that is not half as song-graced and life-drenched as the one where I began to write. It's going to take 5 to 7 million years for the Earth to recover the abundance it lost in our lifetimes, on our watch. Those are the numbers. But at some point, we come to the place where the work of the numbers runs out. And it's time to talk about what climate change means. It's time to talk about how we make sense of this extinction, how we go from an arm's length of facts to the experience of knowing that might lead us to act. It might lead us to act as though we know the depth of the trouble that we're in. So that's where I am as a writer. That's where I am as a writer, is trying to take those numbers, the 50, that's 78 in this case, and make them into some sort of expression of love for the world. And that's what I've brought for you today, is examples of that kind of work that I've been doing. And so let me just start by reading you an essay that I hope helps us recognize the trouble we're in. Okay? This comes from Earth's Wild Music. Earth's Wild Music, celebrating and defending the songs of the natural world. You know, at first I tried to give that a title that was more evocative, like the songs of dead birds or something like that. But, you know, publishers these days don't find that bad news sells very well. And so here we go. It starts out celebrating and defending the songs of the natural world. So here comes Common Muir, from an essay called The Terrible Silence of the Empty Sky in Earth's Wild Music. Wearing a yellow raincoat, the boy wandered the beach between the high tide line and the falling tide. He leaned over now and then to drop a treasure into his blue bucket. The little boy was whistling. Whenever he's content, he is whistling. The sandpipers piped. A gull threw back her head and brayed. The bell buoy chimed. I sat on a drift log grinning as the voices came together to shake the air into something lovely and pure. The boy suddenly paused and took a few steps backwards. His whistling stopped. With his plastic shovel, the boy dug at a disheveled black form, matted in blown sand. It took him several tries to pry it into his bucket. I went to him as he turned toward me. What he had in his bucket was the limp body of a black and white seabird, a common Muir. Muirs have always been one of the most numerous of marine birds, maybe 13 to 24 million at their peak. But now, in the warming, souring ocean, they're struggling to find the fish they need to feed their chicks and keep themselves alive. I had hoped it would be a long time before the great starving would reach the Oregon coast, but this might be the beginning of it in this blue bucket. I did not talk to the boy about this. Carefully, we emptied the bucket onto a polished log. Here was the body of the mure, feathers broken, head hanging. Here was a blue by-the-wind sailor, a small jellyfish with a wing to catch the wind. Here was a mudstone, shaped by the fossilized shell of an ancient butter clam. The mure would want to be buried here at the beach, the boy decided, in the place it knows and loves best, where its mom and dad are probably nearby looking for him. So this is what we did. We dug a hole behind the log. We buried the mure in sand and decorated the grave with the treasures the boy had found. Standing erect, looking out to sea, the boy whistled a sad song for the dead bird. Then, hand in hand, we walked down the beach under the terrible silence of the empty sky. Five times in planetary history, as you know, life has faced catastrophic extinction. And you know all those stories, awful forces of exploding rocks and boiling seas and poisonous clouds, or icy glaciation and shrinking seas and comets. All these catastrophes ended forever the possibilities in the strange and wonderful bodies. 5 massive extinctions when evolutionary development started over again with whatever was left. And now we're told that we live in the time of the 6th great extinction, bringing the Cenozoic era to a close. So this is what I wonder, is it possible? A collision with an asteroid marked the end of the Cretaceous 66 million years ago, when perhaps 80% of species vanished, including most of the dinosaurs and many of the small creatures of the sea. Is it possible that we're living through an extinction event of equal power? What could be the cause? Increasing human population, deforestation, a dramatic destruction of habitat, overharvesting of the ocean, poisoning of land and air, agricultural expansion, and climate change. It's a good long list. And what causes that? A way of life, a constantly growing, all-consuming culture driven by what I would call proudly amoral extractive industries and brazenly lawless governments in deep collusion. An axis of betrayal. Do not say species are disappearing like dew disappears in sunshine. Do not say that species are going extinct, like little pigs go to market, or like elderly uncles go insane. It's not like that. Human enterprise is killing the plants and animals at a rate of 1,000 to 10,000 times higher than the background rate. It's generally a quiet slaughter, a spreading silence. One gulp as an owl swallows a poisoned rat. One soft tick as a starving sparrow driven inland by a wildfire falls through branches to the ground. One frog, mottled with fungus, slowly dissolves. So, emptiness is a thing. It falls over the field like fog. And nobody can pretend that habitat loss is a thing that just happens. It's not true. Habitats do not wander around and get lost. like children at the zoo. Developers don't lose habitats the way they lose their keys. They destroy habitats, and that destroys the creatures. This is tar sands up in Alberta. It used to be a forest. Industry traded the forest, which did not belong to them, by the way. It belonged to the First Nations people. They traded the forest for tar sands. I'm sorry. You didn't come out here to be depressed, and here I am. But I'm not done yet. It's madness, isn't it? The trades that we make, it's mad. Unless something stops us, we'll keep on converting living creatures into dead commodities. And we trade deep, mossy forests for uselessly large homes. We trade white-winged albatross for plastic six-pack rings. We trade a singing marsh for another Walmart parking lot. It's madness, this consumption, this eating up. Okay, we trade rhinoceros horn for male sexual potency. We trade bear spleens for sexual potency. We trade Tibetan red deer for sexual potency. What is this overriding need? We trade democracies for thuggish petrostates. We trade bees for sterile lawns. For corn to burn in our cars, we're happy to give up monarch butterflies. For one more fitness center, we blithely give up a spring chorus of frogs. For petrochemical products, we give up the goddamn future. It's a frenzied, mad auction of what's of ancient value for what's cheap and desperately sad. It's a mad rush to the end of the world. It is, you cannot deny it, it is a going out of business sale. So my point is that for all the horror, the early extinctions were Earth's natural processes, acts of God. This extinction is acts of people who think they're God. This great wave of extinctions is the direct result of human decisions, knowing and intentional, or wantonly reckless. And that changes a calamity. That changes a calamity into a cosmic crime. Okay, the fact is, I'm angry, but I'm also scared to death. Nobody should assume that the human species is going to come out ahead on this trade. Okay, so here's Daniel Quinn. We're like people who live in the penthouse of a 100-story building. In case you needed help in visualizing that. Every day, we send workers down to the foundation to pull out a couple bricks that we take up to the penthouse to make our penthouse fancier, bigger, richer. More gold. This might work for 100 days, but it's not going to work for 100 years. Because at some point, we will have created so many channels of emptiness that the entire structure will collapse. And our position at the top of that penthouse will not save us. So any culture, I submit, that prides itself on accumulating wealth instead of sharing it, any culture that gobbles up the fecundity of the planet instead of nurturing it, any economy that eats its own children, an economy of infinite extraction will kill off the sources of its sustenance. How can it be rational? How can that be right? We're at the hinge point in history. Today, this year, this decade, I don't know, but it's a hinge point in history where we're desperately searching for a way forward, even if it breaks our hearts. We have to ask ourselves, how much do we love too much to lose? Where will we draw the line? We are talking about something of deep sacredness. It's the endlessly creative world that we have to save. It's the lyric voices of the birds and the whales that we have to hear. It's their sanctity that we have to protect. So the creativity of this world is continuing to unfold. We have to be prepared to wonder at this unfurling. We have to be prepared also for this, that every extinction, every suffering, every destruction is a diminishment of that creativity, and so it's a profanity. We have to be prepared to be angry. We have to be prepared to be grief-stricken. We have to be prepared to love this world in ways that are beyond our own understanding. And it's that love that brings us to the work ahead of us and gives us courage in the struggle. So I take students up to the Andrews Forest in the Cascade Mountains. The first thing I do is put them on little boats on the water in the dark, under the full moon. And I say, don't come back until you are able to tell me what it means to love the world. We'll get back to that. But I once asked this group of writing students to pull out their pens and start writing a list of what they loved too much to lose. You know, they started out strong. The smell of wet oak leaves, nuthatch call, lichen like lettuce leaves, yeah, licorice taste of fern roots. Keep going. What do you love too much to lose? Think it. What do you love too much to lose? But the students couldn't keep it up. They just couldn't keep it up. One student put down her pen and she reached out to hold a student who was crying. Beetle tracks on a burnt log. Nettle soup. Teeth in an owl pellet. Buds in the spring, any kind of bud. Chains of filbert flowers. Another student put his head in his hands. Do we have to do this? A student asked, do we have to do this? Dragonflies. Yes, you have to do this. I'm sorry, sometimes I shout at my students. It's all we can do. We have to keep a list. We have to keep them in mind, all these small glories. We can't let any of them escape our attention. Every day, every moment, we have to name what we love. We get up in the morning and name what we love and stand to lose. Oak galls, a robin's morning call, the funk of fresh soil. So here's what we'll have to do. We will love the world with a tender and voracious love, and we can do what we can to protect and renew it. Both of these. Even if it breaks our hearts, even if we fail in the end, that's what love means. That's why we're here. I've already made the claim that numbers fail, and so when we run out of the power of numbers, then we turn to words. And then there comes a time when words fail. And that's when I turn to music. And I have put together any number of films that put the words and the music together in yet another attempt to bring life to this grief. We're going to work on this. I have the text of that I can read to you through the microphone. But I have to look it up on my computer, and I don't want you to just have to sit there and wait for all that. So let's do this. Let's take a few minutes here for questions that you might have.
Can you hear me now? Okay. First of all, I want to thank you enormously for your presentation. It resonated with every fiber of my being. I have to wait.
I'm not done yet.
It has resonated. Oh, shit. Okay. The question I want to ask is this. Many, many years ago, I realized that the effect of the human civilization on the planet, and particularly money was the key, was the cancer of the earth. And that when a system has a system that is growing out of control, a cancer, very occasionally, most of the time it ends in death, as we all know. But occasionally, very rarely, but nevertheless, has been documented, is something called spontaneous remission, where somehow when somebody has terminal cancer, it suddenly goes into remission and disappears. People don't know how it happens, they only know that it happens, as far as I know. My question for you then is, do you think it's possible for our current cancer of the earth to go into spontaneous remission?
Oh my. Well, I did it to you. You might as well do it to me, right? Oftentimes, it's a very sad question that you asked, because you think about all the ways that we treat cancer and all the damage that we do to the human body in order to treat the cancers and the suffering that goes along with that, and that I worry that the effort to strike out this cancer will do irreparable harm to the body of the planet. Let me change your question just a little bit and say that I think oftentimes people say to me, human beings are a cancer on the earth. We are the problem here, and that everything would be great if we would just go away. And in fact, Alan Wiseman, a friend of mine, wrote this wonderful book called The World Without Us, where he went to places where people were not, and he pointed out how beautifully nature was rebounding. I am not one of those who thinks that about human beings. I think human beings are part of creation. I think we just lost our way, which in ways that I'll talk about in the second half. I think human beings have the capacity to be remarkably gentle, calm, kind. And I also think that the universe needs human beings, because human beings are the way that the universe celebrates itself. And I think that's a very important thing to have happen. So, which is a long way of saying I have no idea what the answer to your question is.
I'll try to speak loudly. Brad is my name, and I kind of was struck by your statistics regarding the number of animals dying. Would those rates be similar for the number of species, I don't want to say going extinct, that are extinct now relative to that beginning period? Is it a similar proportional decline of the number of species commensurate with the number of animals?
So the point that Brad is making is that my numbers had to do with individuals, how many creatures. His question then is, what about species? And I very carefully didn't include, or didn't want to mix up species numbers and actual numbers and things. But my understanding is that we're losing 150 species a day. And we're losing far more species than we have ever identified. And that we're losing them in particularly dangerous ways, particularly the pollinators and the insects, who are the foundation of agriculture. I should have, but do not have in my mind, the number of primates that are endangered of extinction, but it's high. So I should have brought them, but I did not. Yeah, but you make a very good point. Yeah.
I'll try to speak loud. Then I speak less loudly. Thank you so much, and I'm waiting for more. I know there's more. My name is Neely. When we made the analogy to cancer and suffering, the treatment for cancer, I think one of the biggest sufferings or side effect of trying to cure the cancer of the earth here is a very big cultural mindset change, not just from the extracting industries and the bad governments, but all of us here trapped in this consumer, buy more, accumulate more, show your wealth mindset that a lot of the Western world, especially this country, seems to have. Do you see any hope that we can change people? The data is, just shocking, but data doesn't change people's behavior. How do we change the behavior to not want more all the time?
Hope is a hard question, and maybe we should save that one for a little while later. But this notion of being trapped in a consumer culture is one that I think is really, really interesting. What traps us? Are we really trapped, or are we unimaginative? Erica Jong says she had this dream where an angel said, if we fail this time, it will be because of a failure of the imagination. And then she put the world gently in the palm of my hand. I think that we need to imagine new lifeways, that we need to break out of the stories that we are told by consumers about who we are and what we need, which are lies, and reimagine ourselves and what we need in ways that are sustainable on the earth. Do I have hope that will happen? Not without a lot of suffering. But do I think that'll happen? I think eventually it will, because the earth simply can't do it. I mean, it's simply impossible for us to continue this way. And there will come a point when we will have to reimagine what a good life is. What precedes that, I tremble to think. But if we could get ahead of the game and do this hard work of imagining and imagining what a good life is, and then having the courage to live that life, then I think there is some reason to think we might break out of this. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Bonnie. I love that this is a very emotional approach and appeal to, and I'm sure most people in this room have had an experience of trying to speak to a climate denier. Using rational appeals and going nowhere. So I'm just curious how this more emotional appeal, have you tried to give it to climate denier type audiences, and what's the reception, and what do you think is landing?
We've tried to give it to everybody we know in every possible way we can. I think that we have seen, and I would give my work no credit in this regard, but I wonder, are we being silenced in some sort of way? I'm starting to see some change, for example, among scientists who have been raised with this notion that they really cannot take a stand on any policy issue, and they certainly wouldn't express any emotions because that would damage their credibility. But now we're seeing scientists step out all over the place and provide what I call a second premise. So here's the deal. We used to think, this is the logician in me speaking, this is me trying to channel Aristotle. In the climate crisis, we used to think that facts were what was missing, that if people only knew. If people only knew, then they would take action. So dear scientists doubled down on their education. They reached out, they formed committees, they did pub crawls to try to reach people with more information. But that's simply a logical fallacy. Because, as Aristotle told us, in order to reach a conclusion about what we ought to do, you need two premises. The first premise is the factual premise. It's usually a prediction. Unless the world takes action, by the time today's children are middle-aged, the life-supporting systems of the planet will be irretrievably damaged. That is a scientific claim. You can't get there. You can't get from there to the claim that we have to take action without a second premise. And that premise is a moral affirmation. It's wrong to wreck the world. It's wrong to cause children to suffer. If we know that if we continue this way, this is what's going to happen, and if we know that it's wrong, we take the moral stand that that is absolutely inhumane and morally impossible, then we can reach the conclusion that we have to act. So my colleagues and I have thought that we really need to do the work of the second premise. We really need to do the work of the moral affirmation about what is right and what is wrong, wrong, wrong. And if we combine that with our knowledge, that maybe we could make some sort of forward motion. So I don't think, and maybe I'm delusional, I'm not necessarily thinking of that I work in the area of emotion, although I'm not ashamed to use it if I can, but that I try to work in the world of moral affirmation and standing up for what we think is right and good.
This is Gwen Ellen, and I have a question about like the Walmart parking lots and things like that. With the rise of online purchasing, do you see that changing any of the spread of downtowns and concrete places?
That's a really interesting question. I have not actually given that much thought. I should. I know from my own household and my experience it is getting easier and easier and easier to spend money. Here I'm about to spend money. $125 gone, right? And something being delivered to me. We live in this world where everything is on demand. Music on demand, consumption on demand. Everything is on demand, one click away, and becomes easier and easier to buy things and have them overnight. Whether that saves habitat, my guess is that because it's going to increase consumption, that it overall won't. Because maybe we won't have malls, but just today, I read, President Trump says, "Drill, baby, drill," and now his puppeteer, his puppet master says, "No, now we're thinking about mine, baby, mine." Okay. So we have a few minutes to take a break now, and in that time, we're going to try to bring you some film. Okay, so 10 minutes, is that what it does? Okay, 10 minutes. This is our work, to defend what you love fiercely, faithfully, for all time. It isn't enough to mourn and weep. I believe that in our lifetimes, we have a chance, almost certainly a last chance, to reweave these generative relationships among plants and animals and people and the places that sustain them. And I also believe that if we even come close, it will be because we find this new moral relationship to the land, a relationship of mutual healing that's at the heart of human decision making. And that's what I want to talk about next. Okay. But I also wanted to start okay, now we're at the beginning of the second half. And if you would play the albatross one, what happened here was that I took a number of little essays from erstwhile music and asked some of my friends who are writers and some of my friends who are musicians to put them into these tiny little concerts, tiny concerts. They're all up on YouTube too. Just go to Animal Interludes and you'll find like a dozen of them. And this is one of those. Yes.
Listen, the albatross is whispering to her egg on the nest, her long beak tracked with white trails of the salty tears she has shed, reaches down to touch the shell that holds her child. Small sounds, whistle tick, mumble. Surely the blind curled chick hears his mother. Does the mother albatross pray? A woman asks. May seas be kind, may anchovies be plentiful, may winds be steady under your wings. Does she promise? Asks another. I will nudge you into the sweet feathers of my chest and sing to you a whistling song. Until you fly from me forever, I will keep you safe and defend you steadfastly. A third woman asks, does the albatross in her sorrowful wisdom warn the chick? Soon you will spread your wings and soar into a world gone suddenly cruel, the winds ferocious and crosswise, the sea currents confused, the fishermen desperate, the sun hot on the seas. The ocean will offer objects that will not nourish you. Cigarette lighter, toothbrush, bottle cap, button, bread bag, baited hook, doll's severed arm. But sardines and bloodied herring torn by feeding whales will be few. You will be hungry. Does she say that? Does she silently weep?
Thank you, you did it. We are living in the midst of a disaster unfolding around us. It's such a beautiful day. It's such a beautiful campus. The people here are so beautiful. It's hard to even hold that in your mind. The thing about a disaster is that we know from history that disasters call people to action, that disasters call people to the best that there is in their work. They call us to levels of compassion and courage that we didn't know we had. They're like a wave. You know how waves on the beach, they'll lift you and they'll smash you in the same wild movement. So disasters smash us with sorrow and lift us with determination. And they transform love into a force that's strong enough to change history. So this is what I propose is our work right now. It's the work of loving this weary, reeling world. And don't we have to try? So, I'd like to read you the parable of the crab, okay? It's actually I will tell you it's a story about my grandson, but that's not, I shouldn't have told you that. And it's, okay. Really closer, gets rid of that? Okay. This takes place in Alaska. John told you that we live there in the summertime. And so here we begin. Let us join a party in progress on the deck of a cabin overlooking the shoreline of a little Alaskan boardwalk town. Perched on whatever serves as a seat, an overturned bucket, a log, a railing, people are drinking salmonberry wine and catching up with their neighbors. A bluegrass band tunes up, 4 guys in plaid shirts and rubber boots just off the ferry. The children have all run onto the beach. They are, of course, running with sticks. But this is a harbor town, not a parent shouts a warning. If the kids can't figure out how to dance with sharp objects without putting out an eye, they will never make it on a salmon trawler. The children roll big stones and poke with sticks, hooting and jostling. Only one kid stands apart, a lanky little boy in a blue sweatshirt, twisting one foot into the other. Then the boy is running into a clump of kids, grabbing something from the beach and heaving it overhand like a baseball into the sea. Stop it, you guys, stop it. Another kid chases the boy, but he twists free, grabs something else from the beach and throws it hard. He has thrown maybe a dozen pitches into the waves when a big girl grabs his throwing arm and wrestles him to the sand. It takes a while before the boy can scramble up the bank into his father's arms. It takes even longer for his folks to figure this all out, the way he pants and protests. Gulls swirl, crying out. The children follow the boy up the bank, wanting to tell their side of the story. "What were you doing?" the boy's father asked. "I was throwing crabs into the ocean." "I was throwing crabs into the ocean. But why?" "To save them. Justin picked up a beach crab, but it pinched him, so he stabbed it through with a pointed stick and stuck it to the ground. And then all the other kids started sticking crabs to the sand. I tried to throw all the crabs into the ocean, but Chrissy held me down." "Yeah, because you stole Chrissy's crab," a tall boy interjected. "It wasn't Chrissy's crab, and she was going to kill it." Pretty soon all the children are yelling. As the banjo gallops on, the boy clings to his father and sobs. "You did the right thing," his father murmurs into his son's damp hair. This is true. We may imagine the father proud of his son and maybe a bit frightened for him, because this also is true. For every person who tries to stop destruction, there will be others who block him. It's important to know that this will happen. Other people may hold him down. Others may laugh at him. The winds may turn against him. Destructive winds ride a long, straight fetch through history. It takes moral courage to stand against their force. The beach exhales in horror, then holds its breath in hope, Because when the boy throws the crabs into the sea to save them, he shows the other children that it can be done. It is possible to stand against destruction. It is possible to make some difference, if not all the difference in the world. The boy could have taken a stand saying, "This is wrong, and I will not be part of it." That's good. But even though he's small and the others are big, he says something even better. "This is wrong, and I will not allow it." So this is how the story of the crab thrower concludes as the banjo-beaten day slides to its golden end. So what do we have to do? 3 things, and we have to do them all. Stop the killing, defend everything that's left, and create lifeways in harmony with the earth. That's all. Number 1, we will stop the mad killing. It's true. It's true that thousands of species are irretrievably gone. It's true that the regulatory agencies that might have defended clean air and clean rivers and migratory birds and outlawed poisons have been captured or purchased outright by the very corporations they're meant to regulate. So it's true that corporations are free to make a profit, and damn the consequences, particularly if those consequences are borne by those who have no voices to defend themselves. And who are these? Small children, plants and animals, marginalized people, increasingly marginalized people, future generations of all species, and those who Pope Francis called the silent voices screaming up to heaven. It's true. It's true that change occurs. If it occurs, it will be led not by some moral awakening on the part of the government, but from the conscience of the streets. That is you, and that is me. The harm that's happening is because we're letting it happen. But the point is, at the exact moment that despair is intellectually justified, it's morally impossible. And the very facts that paralyze our action are the facts that require it. We love the planet and it's being stolen from us. We have to turn away from despair and defend the world. How can one person stop the killing? That's what people always ask me. I'm just one person. What can one person do? And the answer is, stop being one person. Pick up the phone, call a friend, join an organization, donate your money, donate your time. And you know what? Because of time, I'm going to just do this. 2 things are happening, and if you want to not be one person, you might consider signing up. One is a whole new website that's called Republic, and it has come up in defense of public land. If there's anything that's going to destroy animals and plants and habitat faster than anything else, it's going to be the privatization of public land and the very quiet, very slick, very steadfast selling of the land to mining corporations, grazing corporations, taking it out of public hands and putting it in private hands. Republic is a good organization to work with on that. And I love Oregon Wild. You probably already are members of Oregon Wild. They're good. And they're doing that kind of work right here, saving the habitat, stopping the poison. The other one is down in Eugene, and it's called, help me, Toxics, Beyond Toxics. It's against the poisoning of the landscape. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about stopping the killing. We can't do it by ourselves, but we can do it in collaboration with other people, and they're out there and they're doing it, and they need our help. So that was quick. Step 2, defend everything that was left. All those urgent lives, all those plants and the animals. You know, we have stories about this. Noah in the Bible knew that whatever survived the great flood would repopulate the world, the lions and the elephants 2 by 2. And now we know that millennia later, the world is going through a biological bottleneck that's as brutal as God's fury in Noah's time. And whatever species make it through, that's what the world is made of. Noah, remember? Noah protested. He said, "I'm old, I'm tired. Why me, O Lord?" The answer is, it's got to be everybody. Each one asking, what ark can I build? What habitat can I save? What can I create that will carry living things? Now already, only 17% of the Earth's surface is protected from plunder. And who knows what will be tomorrow at the rate at which protections are being removed. But right now, 17% of the Earth's surface. E.O. Wilson, bless his heart, the famed ecologist whom one of you cited just a few minutes ago, says that half the Earth should be a refuge for wild things. We can help. We can help on that. We can dig out our lawns and make our backyards into wildlife refuges. You could do that today. It's a beautiful day. You could get started. No birds should starve in your yard. We can make our churchyards into native habitats. Tear out the lawn. Put in native plants. Nobody should walk in the path to God's house without getting seeds in their socks. We can keep our rivers cool enough for salmon, which are dying of heat stroke in Canadians' rivers. We can make our rivers safe enough if we can stop the logging that shades the rivers. We can keep the Arctic plains quiet enough for caribou if we stop that drilling. We can keep our marshes wild enough for frogs if we stop the incessant development. And we can keep our neighborhoods safe enough for the birds and the children, by the way, if we can stop the poison soaked into even the seeds. You can go home today and call your neighbors and say, let's make this street, let's make this neighborhood into a wildlife refuge. Let's make a list of the things that we need to do. I actually brought that list. And I'll hand it to you as you leave, just in case anybody thinks there's no homework. You know that rat poison, just as incidentally, I thought you might want to know, that rat poison has the effect of making rats really thirsty. So driven by that, they go out, day, night, doesn't matter, they go out and into the exposure, and of course then that's the eagles it's the owls that kill them, and the owls then die by the ponds. And then after we all do these things, we can start putting it all back together again. All that has been destroyed, everything has to be put back together again into a right relationship. So that leads us to number 3. We've got to find a better way. And this takes us back to your question. We have to find a better way to live on the planet without wrecking it. There has got to be a better way. So here's the deal. I've always wondered if people who live through times of dramatic change feel it coming. Did the serfs lean on their hoes and think, wow, these ages are starting to get dark? Did the centurions polish their swords and say, you know, this Roman Empire, which has risen, seems about to fall? If you live in the last decades of Earth's most beautiful and abundant geological epoch, as we may well, this epic of birdsong and oysters, would you know that in advance? I used to think probably not, that change happens slowly and we often don't recognize it except when we look back. But I don't think that's true anymore, because I really can feel the Earth shifting. We are at a hinge point in history You could drive a nail through this year or next, and the world would swing in the balance. We're tumbling toward the end of something and the beginning of something not yet determined. At this point, I'm kind of leaning on my hoe, and I'm saying, one of the important things at coming to an end is a story we tell ourselves about the world. We'll call it an ethos, a worldview. It's a seldom questioned understanding of the world and our relationship to it. For centuries, the world has rested its economy, its self-esteem, everything, its traps, its consumer traps, its hamburgers, everything on three big ideas. Anthropocentrism. This whole idea is that humans are the source of all value, and the only value of natural creation is its usefulness to us. Right? This notion that we are the apex of creation, that God created us to rule the world. And we're so smart, and we're so industrious, and progress is so inevitable that we can do it. That's one of the ideas, one of these myths that we have controlling ourselves. The second one is dualism. The idea that there's this wide gulf that separates human from all the lesser beings, right? Through our exalted minds, we can understand, and therefore we can manage nature and turn it to our own singular purpose of endless progress. There's two kinds of things on the earth. There's us, and there's them. And the third myth, and these myths are dangerous because we don't recognize they're myths. We swim in them. It's the old thing about fish. The old joke about the fish? Somebody says to a fish, "How's the water?" And the fish says, "What water?" Not a very good joke, but one tries. We swim in these ideas and then we think that they're inevitable. The last one is materialism. The universe is dead. Thank you, Rene Descartes. Animals, cats, dogs, are intricate machines. They have no spirit. They have no urgency. They are simply machines that tick along in life. We humans, of course, have spirit, and we have an imagination, and we have soul, and we have intention, and we have consciousness, and that sets us apart from the machines and the rocks, and it sets us apart from the rivers and the cedar trees and the robins, which is all dead stuff, right? So what's clear to me is that that's over. It has been an experiment, a centuries-long experiment, and the results are in. That hypothesis turns out to be false. That hypothesis turns out to lead us to the edge of the cliff. And what we are coming up with now is a new Earth ethos. We're not just making this up, folks. This is a new worldview, a new ethos that comes from ecological science. It comes from indigenous thinking, indigenous wisdom. It comes from all the Eastern religions and many of the Western ones, except the monotheistic ones. It comes from evolutionary science. They're all telling us the same story, that human beings are creatures of this earth, that we are deeply interconnected with the microbes in our gut, with the bird song in our ears. We're intricately interconnected with the food we eat, the songs we sing. We are all connected. It's one world. And that we're all therefore interdependent. We deeply depend on everything that the earth gives us: the sun, the water, the rain. Jack Forbes, a marvelous California native man, said, "You could take away my ears and I would still live. You could take away my fingers and I still would live. You could take away my legs and I would still live. But if you took away the sun, I would die." So why do I think that the sun and my fingers and my ears, my fingers and my ears and my legs are more part of me than the sun? So we're all interdependent on this earth with the things that life gives us, and that we all share this mutuality of well-being. That is, that what's good for us is good for other creatures, if what's truly good for us, and what's truly healing for other creatures is truly healing for us. So we need to tell ourselves new stories. We need to tell ourselves how we're going to live in accordance with this new earth ethos that imagines the interconnection, this beautiful, loving interconnection. So when we talk about what it means to love the earth, it means to recognize our deep relationship to the world. So let's see. People say that, where am I going here? Yeah, I'm going to Great Tide Rising. People say, it's not going to work, we can't do it, it's too much for us, and so forth. And I wanted to tell you another story about that and how we can be part of this great healing work. You might not know the town of Lancaster. It's just down almost to Eugene. It consists, I'm reading now, of an antique store called Antique Store, which makes sense to me, and an outdoor restaurant called The Junkyard, most likely because the entrance is marked by a rusted-out Chevy with a pile of dirt and dead chrysanthemums where the engine should have been. It's a popular place. Pickup trucks pull in, dragging clouds of country western music and dust. Oversized dogs hang out on the parking lot sniffing at the fence. This is what it is now, but 150 years ago, Lancaster was a bustling steamboat landing on the Willamette River. Located just a few miles south of Sam Dawes Landing, Lancaster was as far up the river as a paddle wheel boat could go. Upstream, the river pushed up shoals, braiding into a complex weave of channels and gravel bars that blocked everything but canoes. But situated right along a navigable stretch of river flowing through the middle of the richest wheat fields and forests in the state, Lancaster had everything. Warehouses, mills, lumber yards, orchards, grain and planks to be loaded for Portland, preachers and shysters and settlers to be offloaded. I can imagine rain shining on the backs of the California workers carrying heavy loads up the boat ramps. I can imagine the algae smell of the river, the wood smoke, the spice of fresh cut Douglas firs. It would all be easy to imagine except for one thing. Today, Lancaster is nowhere near the river. From the junkyard parking lot, the land stretches east over grass fields, pasture land, and a couple of depressions lined with trees, but there is no sign of the river. As it happened, just as Lancaster got really going, the river picked up and left in the dark. When people went to bed, the Willamette was flowing along past town nice and steady, but heavy rains were falling on damp snow upstream, and sure enough, the river quickly rose into the Great Flood of 1861. The flood ripped at the riverbanks and tore out great cottonwoods. Sometime in the night, the river jammed up against the mud and trees it carried. With nowhere to go, the river tore open another channel. By morning, it was flowing along 2.5 miles away, nice and steady. It has been there ever since. An avulsion, my friend Gordon told me as we walked along the gravel beach of the Willamette, talking about rivers. That's the word for what happens when a river's force creates so many blockages that it drops its load and goes a different way. I have never been so excited about a word in all my life. Avulsion. Yes, that's what we need. Let us create avulsions. I had been in despair. The planet is caught up in a river rushing toward a hot, stormy, and dangerous future. The river is powered by huge amounts of money invested in terrible mistakes that are dug deep in the very structure of the land. A woven braid of fearful politicians, preoccupied consumers, cowardly universities, reckless corporations, bewildered parents, everyone, in some odd way, feeling trapped. I had agonized, how could Earth's defenders ever stop a river that flows with that kind of power? But I get it now. We don't have to stop the river with one big dam. We just have to jam it up all over the place. And here's the fun part. The heedless force of the river will do most of the work. As the current rusted by, Gordon explained the rules of rivers. The processes of rivers are manifestations of energy, he said. He's a geomorphologist, and that's how he talks. A fast, high-energy river will carry particles. The faster the river, the bigger the particle. But when it loses energy and slows, the river drops what it carries, creating obstacles that force it to flow in a different way. So anything that slows a river can make a new river course. It could be a stick lodged against a stone, or a cow drowned at high water, a cottonwood tree, maybe undermined by a flood. And here's the point. No pattern continues indefinitely. It always gives way to another. That's a LiDAR portrait of all the channels that the Willamette River has flowed in. When there are so many obstacles and islands that a channel can no longer carry all its water and sediment, it flips and carves a new direction. The change is usually sudden, often dramatic, Gordon said, and pointed over his shoulder into the fields where there once was a wharf. We don't have to dam the whole destructive river. Our work, and the work of every person who loves this world, is to make one small deflection in complacency, a small obstruction to profits, a blockage to business as usual, a better way, a stoppage to the lies, then another and another to change the energy of the flood that is destroying the stability of the climate. As it swirls around these snags and subversions, the current will slow, lose power, eddy in new directions, and create new systems and structures that change its course forever. On these small islands, new ideas will grow, creating thickets of living things and lifeways we haven't yet imagined. These obstructions can turn destructive energy against itself and reverse the forces that would wreck the world. So choose your stone and drag it in, people. Chuck in a bunch of stones or get together with your friends to roll in a boulder. Heave in a log or the rib cage of a drowned raccoon. Push over a dead cottonwood. Build something new. It doesn't matter what. Just get in the way. So we can find the strength in that realization that for all the suffering, all that knowing that the world has gone mad and are now assembled at the brink of collective death, we're not alone. Our task is to heal. Our task is to teach beauty and preserve what's archetypal to our species. Our task is to tell the truth, to fight against what is wrong, 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 to live in praise of life's very existence, to learn to live again in harmony with the land. So in our lifetimes, on our watch, camas can grow again, frogs can find their voices, bluebirds can feed their nestlings, and our children, our beautiful, beloved, despairing children, they can lift their faces at the oak and find strength. Charles Dickens said, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times," right? It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. And isn't this true of the world today? It's a time of heedless destruction, and it's a time of extraordinary beauty. It's a time of bullies, and so it's a time of speaking out. It's a time of lies, and so it's a time of truth-telling. It's a time of uncertainty, and so it's a time of moral resolve. It's a time of sullen stupidity, and so it is a time to let our imagination soar, not to envision the end of civilization, but to set a compass course for its redemption. Choose your stone and chuck it in. Thank you. You're wonderful. You're also in a privileged position. So if it's safe for anybody to take action, it's safe for you too. And that calls us to everything we can do. Now, we have 10 minutes left for questions. I think we have microphones now, or do we not? Okay, we do. You're a miracle worker. They are.
Hello, it's Neely again. Do you see any kind of hope in this next generation, the children that we're worried about? I know my son, who's 23, says he suffers from climate anxiety, and he's not the only one, that it's a thing that runs through his peers and other people his age. So as this new generation comes up and makes decisions and drives political change, would that be helpful?
I'm a college professor, which is a great privilege. If you think that young people don't know they have been betrayed, you're wrong. It's very clear to them that the promises that were made to them have been shattered, and that their challenges are going to be grievous. It also pisses them the hell off when people say, well, you know, it's all yours now, we're leaving the world to you, we trust you to do your best. And I see the students come into the classroom every single day determined to make the world work. Determined. They're determined to learn what they need to know. They're determined to think differently. They're absolutely determined to be the ones, not who saved this way of life. They're determined to be the ones who save the world from this way of life's destructive power. And so they're not signing on to what we're doing. They're not signing on to our ways of life. They're signing on to change. And I'm sure that's not true of all of them. And I just am so sorry. It's hard to know what to say to the young people who are quite rightly anxious about the future. It's terrible what people have done to their prospects. It's terrible. The fact that they can say, okay, teach me something I need to know to make this right every day, I think that's really quite remarkable. So do I have hope for the future? Maybe not. Do I have faith in the young people? I do. I hope you do too.
My name? Brad. I hope I get 2 questions in one session. CO2 is the root cause. CO2 and methane are the root causes. Is there anything a human could do to have more effect than to stop eating cows?
From what I read, the answer to your question is no. That stopping eating cows, well, what did we already say? 60% of the world are bloviating animals. That is to say, carbon dioxide extruding animals. We shouldn't be eating them. We shouldn't. Anyway, they're not good for us.
Hi, I'm Deanna. I had a thought, and I don't know if this would help anybody or in the long run. My daughter worked for an organization in Portland that is called DPAVE. DPAVE, I'm sorry, were you able to hear? Okay. Anyway, what they do is they go in where there are unused parking lots, places usually in poorer areas, and they get rid of the parking lot and they create parks or green spaces and grow gardens and such. These places are donated, but what becomes a problem is permitting. And I'm just curious, how much is just the process of getting permits holding things up?
Of course, I don't know the answer to your question, but I do know that the things like you're talking about, and you must be so proud of your daughter, the things that you're talking about are happening all over the place. There are acts of imagination that are just thrilling, and there are solutions to problems that are actually workable. And it gives me, it just gives me great joy to read these lists of things that people are imagining that we can do differently. It's great.
Go ahead. I'm live. My name is George. I really appreciate your presentation. It's wonderful. I'd like to get back to the question about eating cows and what maybe more could be done as a suggestion. I know that if I live another decade, it will be true that the Earth's population will have tripled in my lifetime, a single lifetime. So I would suggest that long term, if we do what we can to get people to realize that we do not need 9 billion people on the earth, 1 or 2 billion would be plenty. And when we hear economists and others bemoaning the fact that the birth rate is actually lowering throughout the world, we should applaud that. We should applaud that, and we should put stones in the way of those economists and whoever seems to be promoting greater rates of childbirth. And long term, I think if we could reduce the human population over time, it's going to take a while, but if we don't do it, nature certainly will, that would be even more effective than eating less beef, which I have no objection to either.
The question about population control has got tangled up with questions about whose population is going to get controlled in ways that have made the discussion very difficult, and unnecessarily so, because the one stone that you can throw in that river, the one thing that is shown to reduce the birth rate is educating women. So there is something we can do. We can empower women to make their own decisions. Once we do that, then I think we'll be on the way towards what you suggest.
My name is Neil, and I think one thing we probably all share as a group is our memory that our parents wanted to leave a better world for us than the ones that they lived in. And I can say, in the case of my parents, that they certainly did that. The life that I've had is a much richer one than they had. They never went to Europe. They never heard concerts like I do with my wife, and many of the things that I've enjoyed in my lifetime. And then I turn and I look to my daughter, and I see the difficulties that she's up against raising our grandchildren, and you have very clearly spelled out the kind of world that we have created for our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and our yet unborn, hopefully, future generations. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for not only making this issue very clear to us this morning, but reminding us that our lives aren't over, and we can pick up our individual stones and contribute it to changing the direction that things are going in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There is so much left to save. There is so much left to save. We can't give up. Sir.
Okay. I asked during the last session about what your ideas were for how we could stimulate the spontaneous remission of the cancer of the earth. I just wanted to tell you, you provided a beautiful answer to that. Thank you very much.
If only I could. If only. Thank you very much. We've run out of time. Blessings on you. May it be so.